Hello and welcome to the Tech4Climate Podcast. I'm Guillaume, your host, and each week I'm fortunate to share with you stories from climate tech founders, investors, and corporations sharing their unique insights into this fast-moving industry. Eventually, like me, you will learn, discover, and get inspired by those unique men and women who are contributing to the fight against climate change, and I hope it will help you to take a step in this formidable movement. So before we start, I just want to share a few words about us, as this podcast is just the tip of the iceberg of what we do at Startup Basecamp to support the climate tech movement. Our mission is to accelerate capital deployment towards climate tech founders, allowing them to focus on scaling their solutions. How do we do that? Every day, we help founders access to resources and connection and gain the visibility they need to expand their growth. We do this in a number of ways with a membership platform, a Slack group with a growing number of founders, investors, and experts from around the world. And recently, we went one step further with the matching services to connect founders with top climate tech investors. Keep in mind that we are able to do all of this thanks to the support of our listeners and our members. So please like and subscribe, share one episode with a friend, join a community, and if you haven't already done so, make a small donation to support our work. It really means the world to us. And now, enjoy the show! Hi everyone! In this new episode of Investor Series, I'm sitting down with Phoebe Wang, an investment partner at Amazon Climate Pledge Fund, $2 billion fund focused on sustainability and climate change. Their goal is to help Amazon and their climate pledge signatories achieve net zero carbon emission by 2040 through investments in various sectors like transportation, food, circularity, data centers, manufacturing, materials, and nuclear fissions. Phoebe has been involved in climate tech investing for the past 12 years, backing over 30 companies, and 3 of which have become unicorns. Phoebe's passion for sustainability was sparked while witnessing pollution and smog in Asia was growing, which motivated her to pursue a career in climate-focused fields. Phoebe has a background in material science, engineering, business, and environmental engineering, and has worked in various roles before becoming an entrepreneur and investor in the climate tech space. In today's episode, Phoebe discusses the impact of data center and e-waste, focusing on greenhouse gas emissions and the importance of finding alternative, more sustainable solutions, especially moving on into the AI era. Phoebe also tells us about development and innovation and chip design, cooling techniques, and energy storage to reduce energy consumption. We discuss the urgency for self-regulation by big tech companies and the need for circularity and recycling in data centers. The second part of the show, Phoebe gives her advice on the best way to catch an investor's attention with your pitch deck and the importance of building a support system. Phoebe also shares how she navigates a healthy work-life balance with 2 school-age children. Phoebe, welcome to the show. Hi Phoebe, welcome to the Tech4Climate Podcast. I'm super happy to have you here with us today. I'm looking forward for this great opportunity to hear your story and get up to speed on what you guys are looking at with the Amazon Climate Pledge Fund, a $2 billion venture investment program supporting the development of sustainable technologies and services that will enable Amazon to meet its net zero carbon goal. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Guillermo. This is like a really fantastic opportunity to be on your podcast. So thank you.
It's such a pleasure. I'm very excited to hear more about your story. So before we start, that's a tradition on the show. We love to hear a 30-second introduction about the fund that you work with. So can you give us a 30-second intro about the Amazon Climate Pledge Fund?
Absolutely. So I'm an investment partner at the Amazon's Climate Pledge Fund. We are a $2 billion fund focusing on sustainability, climate change, etc., and really helping Amazon and our climate pledge signatories, which are like 400 plus companies that join us for the pledge, basically helping everyone to decarbonize their operations and then get to the net carbon zero goal by 2040. So areas that we have been interested in expanding, continue to invest in are transportation and mobility, food and agriculture, circularity, building. We look at a lot in currently like a data center technology now is we're going to dive deep too. We also look at manufacturing and materials and also nuclear fission.
So let's start from the top. As you probably know, on the show, we love to put the human at the center of the conversation, and for us, it's always more important than all the the work-related topics there. But at first, can you tell us a bit more about your personal story and background? I mean, what are you passionate about? What do you do besides working on supporting, investing in ambitious founders? I mean, what makes you feel inspired, or like your best self? As I always ask, who is Phoebe?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is probably my favorite question. Yeah, so I've been doing climate tech investing in the past 12 years, and the numbers counting. Have invested in over 30 companies, and then knock on the wood, 3 unicorns coming out. So it has been a tremendous journey for me, and all started like when I was still a student, because my parents both of them are engineers and scientists, and especially my mom, like kind of we growing up in Asia and seeing the smog and the pollutions firsthand, and kind of drilling down in my mind that in future I would like once I grew up I would be doing something climate tech and sustainability focused. So I did like material science engineering, and then I also minored in business and environmental engineering, and really kind of set up that foundation. And then after that, did a bunch of different things. It kind of did not start the VC job immediately, as most of VC did. So I did a couple of years as a chemical engineer and a couple of years as a chemical conductor engineer. So doing like IC designs and if you see people like in the wafer and clean room and also like in the jumpsuit, that's a couple of my years time. So and then after that, I kind of fast forward, did a couple of financial institutes jobs. So, like I did commodity trading with City Commodities and investment banking, and then later on started my own company in the like a marketplace space in Silicon Valley, and that was quite a really interesting journey and get me a really good mindset of being an entrepreneur and how to work with entrepreneur and specifically like female founders, which is also another initiative that I'm leading these days. So yeah, so I would always tell people that I'm engineer by training, but yeah, entrepreneur and investor by trade.
And I heard on top of that you're also a busy mom, so congratulations for doing all of that and at the same time having a family. So tell
Yeah,
us a bit more
absolutely. Mhm.
about this experience and maybe that could be a good quick segue here. I mean, you're mentioning about your initiative for
Yeah.
women as well. Like, I mean, what would you recommend maybe to women? Like on the one side who have like a active and exciting careers and at the same time an exciting family. How do you combine both?
Yeah, so that's a question that I got asked a lot about my mentees actually actively mentor like so far probably close to 100 like uprising women, and it's always like because for women you have this biological clock, right? If you want to start family, you want to start like in that specific window. But I think nowadays there are a lot of different like means for people to go around it, right? Like if you want to start a family, there are different ways to do it, egg freezing being one. I know that a lot of my peers and it has been like a really popular solution and kind of postpone your biological clock. But in general, I think people don't usually ask men about like how you balance family and work, right? So I think getting a lot of buy-in from the society and from your workplace and also from your partner is really important. And also I think for female, we are actually in one of the best times. So think about the time before when women cannot even allow for vote, and now like women are sitting on the board at the board. I have a lot of great mentors like Jennifer, who is the head of DOE, is one of them, and Megan Sharp, like who's now leading the decarbonization partner, which was kind of co-founded by Temasek Holding and BlackRock. So these are like fantastic women that you can look up to. That to me, like I feel tremendously grateful. So I'm also trying to bring the baton to the next station and try to support the rest of the female founders and even female investors. On the female founders side, I want to highlight that we at Amazon, we have the Female Founder Initiative. So that's $50 million that we're doubling down into the female founders, especially at the C stage, where we think majority of the female founders do not have the supporting system compared to the male counterpart at that stage. So think about the capital and role model, right? So when women first started off as a graduate from the STEM program, and by the way, last year, we are achieving like 44% STEM graduates that are female in US. And so there's really no pipeline issue in terms of like a bright young minds trying to start a company. But the VC investment kind of going to female funded company that are staggering 2%. So basically you have 44% of the like bright young minds that are female, but only kind of a fraction percentage point are being funded. So what we think is a strong role model is important. So we are building out a community in the Amazon environment and then in the broader ecosystem so that women can look them up to. So good example would be like Genesis founder Luna Yu, and then also Zero Avia co-founder Katia. So these are like hard tech female founders, and also like they have their own life and family, right? So it's important to let the younger generation know that this is something doable. And then two, is probably the critical one, is the capital wise. So that's why we put the money where our mouth and where we think the most important things are. So really kind of focusing on female founders and help them bridge from just a concept MVP to commercialization. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that, and for all the women who are listening to the show. Definitely, there's a lot to be inspired from you and from like pushing this kind of initiatives and really like carrying it. I think it's super important. And by the way, on our side, we also do like on a quarterly basis a review of amazing women in climate tech, and we did like eight different release of like 20 women. So we'll keep doing that, because I think women need voices from the women's side, but also on the men's side. I think that's also something super important. So let's go back to the your journey a little bit on the work experience, and you already shared with us like this journey. But could you maybe like share with us one or two pieces of experience in a way that gave you an edge to join the Climate Pledge Fund as a partner?
So like advice around like how to get into the climate tech investing?
No, like literally, like if you reflect and step back and look at your own personal journey, what would you identify as a one or two piece of experience or things that you learn along the way that in a way give you an edge to join the fund, and really thinking, okay, that's really useful, and that allows me to be where I am today?
Yeah, so I think the first one would be the technical training. So like right now, most of the companies that I'm investing in and looking at are the deep tech companies. Think about founders who are PhD students, right? And like long-term research and multiple grants and patent holder how are you going to connect with them and then be able to understand their thought process, the technology that they have, and then more importantly, how valuable is the technology, how to read a patent. So I think that early on my training, like as an engineer, and then being like a couple of years to like really work as an engineer, helped me build that mindset to be able to bridge that like from investor, but then when you're doing your due diligence and then initial thesis development, that is really helpful. And then I think especially I'll take the data center, for example. Earlier in my career, that was like in the 2000s, right? So semiconductor was something that still like there are a lot of frontier technology being involved over there. I was able to like work on the ground floor as an engineer and really kind of put it on the chip on the PCB board. Those kind of hands-on experience is very helpful for me to understand now like what are the like the fundamentals of the data center, what are the key technologies that we actually need to build in, and how realistic is the implementation. So those are very helpful, and that comes with the training, with the experience. And I would highly recommend that if you're thinking about like if there's any audience that are in the space, right? If they're in school, get some technical skills. If you're an econ major, get a technical minor, and vice versa. I think that's helpful. The second piece would be my entrepreneur journey. So my startup was a completely different space. At that time, I was trying to solve my own problem. So it's like marketplace for childcare. But even for that, I went through incubator. I went through the Skydeck incubator, which like it was sitting in Berkeley, and then I went through the fundraising process and did like the find the co-founder, build the team, do the marketing, build out the website and web app. And then that is a very good experience. And despite like some people will succeed, right? And most people will fail. But even like if your journey did not go to the direction that you anticipated, you actually harvest a lot of like knowledge and experience that are really valuable. So think about now when I talk to founders, I have this like tremendous respect to them because they're wearing so many different hats. They're like doing multiple things. They're working like probably 200% of their time and still trying to raise a family or plan to raise a family, right? So that's very, very like highly respectable to me. And then also being able to guide the founder and be as their true partner. Like most of my founder and even companies that I no longer sit on their board, they would kind of come over to me for advice, etc. I think that kind of camaraderie experience or relationship, it really comes from something like, because I either like be a founder before or worked in a startup. I think those experiences would be really helpful in resonating with founders.
Yeah, definitely. And I think sometimes, based on what I heard and some personal experience, some, investors and VCs that just jumping out of, finance or like or graduate from a MBA or whatever, who didn't get this old journey and resiliency and in a way suffering, getting all the different hats, can forget a bit about like what it really means to be a founder. But anyway, besides the point, I think it's time to dive a little bit into this topic that we decided to cover together: the impact of the data center and e-waste in the era of AI. Why does it matter in the context of the fight against climate change today? So maybe you can start by giving the audience your overview of the current situation in terms of the impact that the data center at large have in terms of their contribution to GHG emissions, the trends and the projections in the near future based on this growing demand for computing power. This will help the audience to understand a bit better the magnitude of the challenge here. So if you can share some data points there.
Absolutely. So I think most of our audience are very familiar with the ChatGPT. I think that elevate the awareness of AI, especially generative AI. and then the large language model, which is kind of the model supporting that, and the foundation model. So in the past year, it has been quite a journey for AI. So OpenAI roll out the ChatGPT, and we have like our kind of counterpart, Google has their Bard engine. And then last month, and then like in June 2023, right? So last month, May, we actually roll out Amazon's equivalent, what we call Bedrock project, which is a foundation model as a service. So we collaborated with all the top AI companies and really provide the services to the AWS customers. So if you're looking at all this kind of AI generated activities, data center cannot be out of the picture, because this is really where all the compute took place. So just give the data for last year. We are so according to many of the different research angles, like it's approaching like $300 billion just annually for in terms of market size for data center, and then it's growing. I think right now as the number is going to be a lot more, right? Last year, I think people were expecting that 15% year-over-year growth. But if you see kind of the chart of how people use the generative AI tools, I think it's not going to be surprising that it's go like up to like a high 2 digits growth. So that all comes into the driving force of the hyperscale data center. Maybe kind of take one step back. On the data center, like there are several kinds of data center. You have kind of co-location data center, which is like you co-locate, you have different customers, but then using the same data center, but you kind of rent out the different server and racks. You also have hyperscale data center or hyperscaler. These are like a gigantic data center that has like thousands of servers and usually in the pretty remote area. You also have like a smaller size of data center called an edge data center, and then those are usually more modulated data center, smaller scale and closer to the customer, so that the computer reaction time would be shorter or latency would be lower. So and then you have like a bunch of others which are like more kind of different types, but those are co-locate or colo, hyperscale or hyperscaler, and then the edge. These are the main three ones. Given the rise of generative AI, we see a huge spike in the hyperscaler. So we probably will see a lot more like a super large data centers being rolled out in the future. And then also like the GPU content will be majority of these data center. So I would call this kind of data center 2.0. Because in the past decades, we're really focusing on like data center 1.0, which is focused on the cloud computing, right? It's not like a hyper, like super high compute density, and you're not looking at AI and large language model, which are like, getting like huge number of inferences and tokens. So so that kind of comes to the like the impact of the environment, because I think most people know that data center needs a lot of space. It needs a lot of like different, like you need memory, right? You need storage, you need compute devices, you need like even batteries to support as a secondary power solution. But most people don't know is the data center consume a ton of energy, and the energy actually do not only go into compute, but also go into cooling. So if you have like, maybe this is like a chip 101, it's like when you do performance on the transistors on the chip, actually generates a ton of energy, and the energy actually was released in the form of heat. So I think in the current majority data center, they're being cooled by air. So it's called air cooled in relation or in comparison to like a more frontier technology that are like a liquid cooling and like subimmersion or on the chip cooling, which we will dive deep a little bit later. But for most air cooled data center, we're looking at like 43% of the energy being consumed are going into the cooling. So it's going to HVAC, going to AC condition, air conditions, and to really reduce the temperature of the data center. That is a huge amount. So to put that into kind of layman terms, right? So if you're looking at potentially a typical data center, it actually consumes like 5,000 equivalent of like 5,000 households energy consumption. So it's a huge amount of energy going into that. And if we can actually reduce the amount of the energy, and we know that if we can reduce the energy to compute, but if we can reduce the energy to the cooling side, it actually is very significant. It's like 43% of reduction of energy going to data center. So that's something that I feel very strongly about. And we can obviously talk about e-waste and other like a secondary power provider a little bit later, but I think the energy consumption is a huge one. And I'm looking for solutions around it.
Yeah, and that's that's tremendous amount of energy that is required. And do you have like trends in terms of like what would be like this increase of energy demand? Based by this like I would say like pushed by this increase of hyperscale or 2.0 data center that you were mentioning. Is any projection already available or it's still like a little bit too early as of for now? You're mentioning I think like 15% growth year to year or something like that.
Yeah, so that was even before the generative AI hype, right? So I think now, if you're thinking about how many people have the ChatGPT downloaded in their app, is huge. So I'm not surprised if we are looking at data center being one of the main force in the future that drives the energy consumption. Trend wise, I think even like I think compared to last year, right? The amount of computing power going to the system because of the ChatGPT, because of the Bard and Bedrock project and Amazon, it's yeah, I'm not surprised if it like a double or triple.
So just to close a little bit, like to really understand the full context here, and before diving into emerging solutions in itself, looking a little bit at the market forces. I mean, how is the current data center market currently organized? I mean, where are the main site located? You are mentioning like remote, and especially for like probably the hyperscale one, for like and definitely kind of like smaller ones. But where are the main one? The main I would say energy consumer, are they connected to the grid, or is it like energy, renewable energy port, data center? I mean, who owns them? And in a way, what's the motivation or incentives for those major players to adapt their operation with a more sustainable approach?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so right now, most of the data centers are connected to the grid. Some data centers, because it requires a lot of power, requires a lot of water for the cooling and for other purpose. So you see a lot of like a data center actually being placed like a coastal. But I think as we progress, we will see more data center in the like a more central locations. And some data center actually are able to get into like a renewable power, like if it's adjacent to a windmill, even like offshore wind, if it's like by coastal, it's easier for that. So in Amazon, we have achieved like 85% renewable power, and that's very significant. Obviously, we're moving towards 100%, but again, that is like the long duration storage is important, right? We need to make sure that we are able to use the renewable power when the wind is not blowing and the sun's not shining. So that's also something that we're looking at very significantly. And then in terms of the major player, so you have all the top names, right? Amazon, AWS, Microsoft, Google Cloud, IBM. You also have like a smaller ones like Equinix, like Digital Reality, NTT Communication, Cisco. So there are a ton of data center providers. So these are kind of their main job or their main business is actually building the data center and provide to others as a service. You also have the more like independent data center operators. So these are something that people probably don't think of. Hospital, universities, colleges, and some research center like national labs. Some of them have their own like small scale data centers so that they can process their data, and then sometimes like it is private, right? You don't want to like use a third party services, etc. Like some organizations would be in that category. But most of those categories are not going to be like your hyperscalers. These are going to be like more modulated edge-based data center.
Thank you so much. I think we get a better understanding of the overall context here. Let's go a little bit deeper into the low-hanging fruits in terms of alternative and solution to in a way to help to clean up those data centers. So clearly, based on what you mentioned previously, the energy consumption, heating, cooling mainly are the two main driver behind the impact that those data center can have. So maybe speaking about the future of the data center and the emerging alternatives to those traditional solution, and based on your understanding of the opportunities that greener data centers can represent as a market, if you could maybe pinpoint like few upcoming innovation that you have seen without the need of naming anyone, but that can really and maybe some companies that you guys invested or some companies that you think that could really solve or bring a solution for organization who are managing those data center with the lens and the scope of energy and cooling.
Yeah. So I think the chip design is definitely the first one, right? How you can get a more efficient chip and be able to process as much information as possible. So we actually see a lot of like different AI chips these days. And if we're thinking about right now, most of the ecosystem or most of the like the programs are still built on NVIDIA's chip, which is really good. They build a really good ecosystem. But for the industry to be like healthy, you need to have multiple suppliers, right? So we're also looking at interesting AI chips and how we can implement that internally. So that is one. And two, as I mentioned, the cooling is one of the biggest one, how we can reduce the cooling. So I'm looking at a lot in the air, like probably not air cooled if unless it's like super innovative and different way of doing that. Because right now, vast majority, like I think 90% or 99% of the data center are air cooled. But we're like looking at liquid cooling, which is like using liquid to kind of have the circular process and remove the heat out of the system, but then also kind of on chip cooling, which is to a different extent, and you can do that as this submersion cooling or on the chip design. So I think those are a lot of like innovations around that, and we are looking at companies in that space. And then the third part would be like the battery or like, as I mentioned, long duration and the secondary power provider. If you go to a data center, you will be able to see like you have like racks of servers, and one main component in most of the data center would have is the secondary power provider. And many of the data center right now are using lithium ion batteries, which is very good, but it's expensive, and then energy density is actually pretty low. So we're also looking at how we can have like a long duration storage to one harvest the renewable power, but also provide us like a secondary power solution for data center. So that is one. And as we moving into the second generation of data center, we move to like greener data center. Inevitably, the first generation of data center, if they're like 10 years old to 20 years old, many of their devices are no longer usable. So we're identifying methods of like how to solve the e-waste, how we create a circularity within the data center. So think about how to like better disassemble a hard drive, and so that we can still harvest the chip, like the chip energy, the memory storage devices out of that, instead of just toss and shred the whole device. So that's something that we're actively looking at, how to reduce the e-waste, how to like reuse, repurpose the materials over there, given that there's a huge shortage of many of the rare earth elements.
Mhm. So, zooming out a little bit, so according to you, I mean, which part of the data center value chain in itself sounds to be very difficult to decarbonize? Do you see like places or spots where, unfortunately, because you mentioned all of those innovations that you see, maybe something that you just didn't speak and you can just give that for the audience here. I mean, what is the improvement percentage in terms of energy consumption that in average you are looking at, and what is reachable and what is in a way impossible to achieve as the 0% in itself or 100% efficiency probably is just a theoretical number. You know what I mean? Are we talking
Yeah,
about real deep solution that really will create a change, or we try to improve, but the incremental is like 5-10% at a time, and it's going to take a long time to go. You know what I mean? And then maybe you can tell us,
yeah,
like, in that value chain, where are the difficult points where it's really, really
yeah,
complicated to change?
yeah. So that could be a whole like a 1 semester course, but I'll just give you
Okay.
kind of the highlights.
We'll try to keep
Um,
it sweet.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But this is a really good question. I'm glad that you asked. So one sector that I have not touched point would be the building side, and building being like I think one of the top three embodied carbon and could potentially be a carbon sink solution, right? So that is one sector or one area that we think there could be a huge impact for data center too. So think about like the size of data center and especially the hyperscaler data center. These are huge size that would require thousands and like millions of tons of concrete and cement. And how are we able to build the data center in a grander form? So we have in our portfolio, and we can name names because they're in our portfolio. We have like a carbon cure and brimstone, which are like a carbon neutral and carbon active concrete and cement solutions. We are also looking at potentially like a 3D printing, etc. Like these are like innovations that can reduce the like manpower going into the data center building. So like really looking at innovations to reduce the carbon footprint of the building itself is tremendous over there. The second part would be the supply chain. So how we like all the technologies that I have mentioned, right? The energy storage, the cooling, the like e-waste, these are something that we can control. But then when we are looking at the emissions, we're not only looking at the scope 1, but we are also looking at scope 2 and scope 3. And then things that we find right now, probably for most of the data center, is a little bit difficult to control with the supply chain. Like for example, you get your chips from the top several, right? You have like a Micron, you have Samsung, you have Hynix, and the TNSC. So if you get those chips which are manufactured in the place that you actually don't have like oversight over, how are you going to manage the carbon footprint or embodied carbon in those? So supply chain is one of the largest one too that we're trying to get our head around it, and then see how we can, like, I mean, data center in general can reduce that. And in terms of specific technology, actually, I think cooling is a huge one, because if we can reduce like 43% of the energy going to the data center and still doing the same amount of compute, it's already like you already have like up to like half of reduction over there. So yeah, so if you're looking kind of the top ones, thinking about all the materials and all the activities going through that, right? So that's why you have the building side, you have the transportation, the supply chain side, and then you also have the device side. And then in each one of them, how we can reduce your carbon and identify the right innovations around that. So it's a huge industry, and I'm hugely excited about it.
Yeah, it sounds that there's a lot of opportunities to improve, make it better, or radically change that as well. So, taking a little macro approach here and stepping back for a second, could you tell us, according to you, I mean, what would be eventually the U.S. advantages or eventually weaknesses in regard of the data center innovation and at large, and putting those innovation into production and at scale? Do you see like any difference between the US versus China and Europe or the rest of the world, or do you feel that innovation and production is really like fostered in the US in itself? I mean, what's your feeling there?
Yeah. So I think the US is definitely the leader. Many of the technologies that you see now in LATAM and then in Africa and in many other regions is actually coming from US in terms of the kind of building out the data center. So yeah, I'm still very optimistic. I think US will continue to kind of be in this leading side, especially like all your large generative AI providers right now, majority of them are in US. So then you have a good like kind of indicators of what kind of technology, what kind of compute profile that you need to have in the modern data center, because like most of our customers are actually locally here. So, but what I think you guys would need to kind of not really worry about, but need to kind of look out for is like the rare earth metal security, because US by definition, like we don't produce lithium, right? We don't produce many of the key elements, not only in data center, but also kind of in different like levels, like device levels. That's why we get our chips from Korea, from Taiwan, etc. So that's something that I think we need to develop internal capability to do that. But we have the right talents, we have the right supporting system, like we have national labs, we have the U.S. government, DOE, Department of Energy, really put a lot of efforts around it and make sure that we have the national security around some of the most important areas like rare earth metals and etc. So that's important. I would talk about kind of the third one, which is kind of renewable power, how to harvest energy from a renewable power. I think long duration storage is one of the key factors in how we are able to generate a much better like long duration storage at the level cost, levelized cost on par with some of the existing like base load or base stack in the power generation or utility scale. I think that's really important for us to get into that 100% renewable power consumption. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So to close this section, kind of wrap up the topic in itself. I mean, what would be the major constraint that you have identified to clean up the data center sector at large, including the end of the value chain, aka e-waste, as you were mentioning? I mean, do you see any major roadblocks? Is it a need of maybe new policies to be put in place? Maybe a lack of funding, so that like if innovation, not too much on that sense, but I mean, what needs to happen to accelerate the movement, and in which timeline do you think it sounds realistic to you to reach this like really like a minor impact that data center could have, because we know we all rely on them for our day-to-day work life, thanks to the internet and technology. So they are really a centerpiece of the society today. So when do you think that that shift and that balance could happen, and what needs to happen there?
I think it needs to happen now. Yesterday is a better day, but today is is the optimal day. So if you're thinking about the e-waste side, we were actually just in the past decade, we were still like using the existing infrastructure, and that was at that time state of art. But now, as we retiring that infrastructure, as we kind of like devices are getting into the kind of finish their lifeline or lifetime, utilization. How are we going to be able to do that? That is actually a new topic, because just like the first generation of Tesla retiring now, then you have suddenly a lot of like repurposed technology and battery recycling providers coming out to help out. I think similar things would happen for data center. I think right now is the prime time for us to start looking at how to solve the e-waste. How are we going to transition from the data center 1.0 to the greener data center 2.0? And many of the technologies we can actually leverage with the existing industrial solutions. So as I mentioned, if we kind of split that into different levels, at the device level, at the chip level, and then at the whole kind of the building materials and facility level, there are technologies that we can refer to in different industries that we can leverage to data center. But obviously data center being data center, we need to have specific system integrator and innovation providers to really help out in that end of life processing. So now is the right time. I said that many times, and hopefully there will be a lot of innovators coming out and start helping kind of smoothly getting to the transition moving.
So before we dive into the Amazon Climate Pledge Fund, maybe just last question on the e-waste side. I mean, do you see any regulation like in place today pushing in a way those producers who are producing those racks and all this technology to kind of think of this after this end of the life and trying to find ways where it could be built in a way that makes it easier to recycle after, based on like the experience that is already starting to grow now in terms of knowledge about how to recycle the different component and where is it blocking. Do you see any like push or trends already happening, forcing those producers which like assemble everything together, or not yet, and that might be a good idea for the future?
Yeah, so there are some like different kind of minor regulations and policies here and there, but I think there's generally like you have IRA, right, Inflation Reduction Act, and really kind of focusing on and supporting the kind of rare earth mining and like recycling. So a lot of that like could be coming from the secondary like repurposed batteries and repurposed devices from data center. So that's a very big like a funding and then pull from the capital side. The other side would be like I think the self-regulation, because I think most of those big tech companies, like we all have our sustainability goal and requirements internally, like we look at that very dearly to our heart. We want to make sure that we're doing things that are good for the environment. So coming from that purpose, we're actually looking at when you're doing the recycling at the end, it'll be a lot easier if you can have something like you designed for the purpose of recycling at the first place. So we have seen a lot of like new innovations around and kind of solving the problems at the beginning of the pipeline or at the upstream stage. So basically, like when you design a hardware device, you probably like it'll be a lot better that you already have the like end of life in mind, and we already see a lot of innovations and push here in the industry side.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. Super exciting and super interesting to see all of those innovation happening and getting your insight on that point. So let's go into the specific of the Amazon Climate Pledge Fund. I mean, can you tell us a bit more about the story? I think it's like since 2021, if I'm not mistaken here. I mean, can you tell us a bit about the genesis of it? What was the initial gap seen by the leadership team that led to the thesis behind it?
Absolutely. 2019, September 19. So that's when Amazon started the climate pledge. So that is the basically we pledged that by 2040 we're gonna be carbon net zero, and that's 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement. And our then CEO Jeff Bezos and then the leadership team they discussed, and then they once they roll out, they think this should be something that not only Amazon should pledge to it, but then also like we should welcome other operations and corporations and organizations to join us. Right now, if we go to the climatepledge.com, you will be able to see we have like over 400 signatories. Those include like HP, Unilever, PepsiCo, etc., like household names, all the way to like startups. Some of them are in our portfolio. They're also Climate Pledge signatories. So we're basically like that organization is a huge sustainability organization and help push many of the initiatives forward. Separately, a year later, in the corporate development team, which I'm sitting in, we have been thinking about if we were going to get to the net zero, we probably should not be using the current technology and current innovations. We should be looking at the more horizon 3 and then technologies that we would be able to use to really decarbonize our own operations. So that's where we decided to send in a proposal to talk about starting a fund and really focused on the climate tech innovations. And very quickly we got approval and we got $2 billion instead of the initial $1 billion that we requested. And like very quickly we assembled a team. Although very, very lean, we were able to invest in over 24 companies and really focus on like different sectors, as I mentioned, like transportation, manufacturing and materials, circularity, food and agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. So so far, we have some household names that many people have heard of. For example, Rivian, which is the electric van that are driving around that will be deliver goods with zero emission. We also have Zero Avia, which is hydrogen for aviation. Because many people probably don't know that we operate one of the largest logistic transportation airlines in Crew. And we also have Redwood Materials, which is the lithium ion battery recycling companies. And they also the company is also co-funded by the previous CTO of Tesla. So many are very exciting companies now in our portfolio and help not only us, but also our signatories to reduce their carbon footprint in their operations.
So that's always a question from many founders. Few months ago, I'm not sure if today is still the case. In a way, cash was more like commodities, and getting cash from investors was already super exciting. But usually was like, what else do they offer? What is the value that you as a fund can offer? And in a way, not just at offering like discount and code and whatever that you could offer, but it's more about like, what are the problems that you see to the companies that you invest in, and how do you, in a way, support them into this, finding solution to those problems? What are the extent of like the support that you can give to those fabulous founders that you invest in?
We call ourselves differentiated capital. So obviously the money part is something that we think startups need, but more importantly, we help the companies. Once you're in our portfolio, we actually would onboard you in our portfolio success team. And those are the team that has tremendous Amazon intelligence and know who you should talk to if you want to have a commercial agreement or pilot or POC with a specific BU business units. So I would take I would take like Rivian as an example. So once we invested in them, we started like working with our internal transportation and kind of last mile delivery team and really kind of pen out a plan to potentially acquire 100,000 Rivian truck for Amazon's delivery purpose. If you're a customer, if you're a startup, having Amazon as a customer is a huge deal. right? Because you're building out your customer pipeline, having one of the largest company being on your customer list, and then it would give you that thumbs up when you do future diligence with other investors and with other customers. That helps you tremendously. So that is one. And two, we think we're very proud of the Amazon way. We call it peculiar way of doing things and innovate. So we have things like thinking backward and two-way door, one-way door decision making process, PRFAQ, which is really kind of thinking backward in terms of the product development, and then also scaling up, how you best kind of scale up with very little resources. So we have developed this program called Amazonians and Residents. Some companies that went through our program or in our portfolio, they're interested in learning and how to develop their own company from 0 to 1 and scale up from 1 to 1 million per se. We would match them with Amazonians who have tremendous training and Amazon's scale up intelligence to help them.
So, besides data centers and all the technology that goes around that, I mean, which sector are the most promising for you today in terms of what I call the ICR or impact cash returns, meaning building like impactful companies while creating highly profitable business? Do you see in your current situation like any underdogs or subsectors, areas that you are excited about?
If you're thinking about like ESG or impact or sustainability, right? I think 10 years ago, this is a kind of new concept. 5 years ago, it's a separate asset. But now and going forward, every company is going to be a climate company. Every company is going to be a sustainability company, because if you're not having those policies built in your company, no matter small or big, you're facing the new generation of consumers, which are hyper sensitive to your carbon footprint. No company is going to survive without a sustainability policy. So I would kind of put it there, like climate tech and climate investor is going to be kind of the mainstream for not only VCs, but also for the larger ones. Now, coming to your second question, like where are the underdogs, etc. I think right now, because we talk a lot about decarbonization, reduce our carbon footprint, many of the technologies that we're looking at, we always have this carbon lens, which is good because like CO2 is one of the most important greenhouse gas. We need to reduce that. But that sometimes have inevitably give us blind spots. For example, like there's water issues, there's biodiversity issues. How are you going to solve those? I think these are things that are very, very under discussed, and we should be able to see a lot of innovations coming out once we do a wholesome evaluation of the environment.
Taking the opposite of the spectrum, what are you less interested right now? What are maybe outdated or might be more like on the greenwashing side of it? Give us some example of things that are less exciting for you guys right now.
Yeah, so I think trying to solve a problem with a solution that you know that sometimes it doesn't work, right? So if it's a company that with an existing solution and trying to find a problem to solve and try to put a layer of climate tech, it's very hard for me to fund those companies because, yeah, a lot of times you're chasing the hype, and you know that it's difficult to chase hype. So I think there are different sectors. I think controversially, right, geoengineering. Like I think right now, you have also like even in the long duration storage side, there's like technologies that doesn't follow the like a first principle that you know that it doesn't work, right? Your energy in versus your energy out. So I think some of those companies and some of those technologies are chasing the hype, which would be like a lot harder to get funded these days. And I would put less emphasis on those. Yeah.
So how do you measure impact? I mean, in comparison to some of the fund out there are putting like we invest in companies that can at scale abate 10 gigatons or have impact in
Mhm.
XYZ. It doesn't sound that it's too much like the case on your side. How is the weight of like impact within your investment decision? Do you rely on a specific framework maybe, or do you have like a team of scientists in house that can assess this technology? I mean, how does it work?
We're looking at the sustainability and CO2 abatement. So we actually look at it from different angles. So the first one, when we look at an investment, we actually look at whether they have the potential for the gigaton CO2 reduction. It's very similar to like when you, as a pure institutional VC, when you invest only for the financial returns, you see whether this investment will be able to return the fund. So similar to us, we want to see whether those innovations will be able to return the CO2 abatement at large scale if the technology proved to be successful. So very similar mentality. Two is we very carefully curated sectors that we're focusing on, which are, I'm going to say again, like building and building environment, transportation, food and agriculture, circularity, manufacturing and materials, data center, nuclear and fission. These are the sectors that we are very, very closely looking at to identify that this would have high impact of the CO2. And then in each of these sectors or swim lanes, then we identify the top players, the top 3 players, and try to invest in them. Now, when we after we invest in them, we obviously kind of track how they are performing, what's the technology development and commercialization stage. And also like when we're helping them, we try to also deploy the technology internally, and we track those as well, like how much, for example, the 100,000 Rivian truck, how much they can help us to do the carbon abatement. But then you also have this technology kind of in the scattering mode, right, in your signatories and in the broader corporate and operations ecosystem. So that is a little bit difficult to gauge, but we're trying to do the best that we can. Separately, like in our climate pledge, like our sister group, the sustainability org, they also develop like annual sustainability report, and many of the data points will be reviewed over there. And I think internally, obviously, Amazon is a very data-driven company. We have a lot of scientists, a PhD, researchers that are putting data together and to evaluate and see how the impact is. Just different ways from the beginning of our evaluation due diligence all the way to kind of once the companies are in our portfolio, how we continue to monitor that.
What's next for the Amazon Climate Pledge Fund? What's next for you guys?
Yeah, so I think overall, we're very passionate about identify the next field, next 10, 20, 30, or 100 companies that would help us to reduce their carbon footprint. And at the same time, really help them to commercialize their technology, have huge impact in not only Amazon, but also in our climate pledge signatories and broader society. Personally, I'm very excited about the data center piece because this is like if you're looking at generative AI, this is probably a huge turning point to the mankind, how we can better support this transition from the hardware side, from the data center side. It requires a lot of work and effort, and I think we're in the right position to make a huge impact in that space.
Little question more on the personal side. I mean, what would you say to people who feel demoralized by all the already visible consequences of climate change? As I always ask, like, are we doomed?
Yeah, so I actually have a pretty controversial thought, and I think that's probably going to be if we can practice that'll have a huge impact, but that's probably anti-development. If you're looking at the whole history of the CO2 emission, we are not like just know the CO2 emission now, right? 100 years ago, there is already people writing books around there's going to be global warming if we continue this on the speed of our development in our CO2 emission. But nothing has changed. Even like in the past few years, that climate tech issues and sustainability issues has been in the top minds of the government leaders, the corporate innovators. But still, like if you, very simple, if you just go to the EIA, to their chart, kind of if you look at the amount of energy that we consume and see the amount of energy actually coming from fossil fuel versus renewable, it's actually we're still on the uptrend, and then the consumption, kind of the composition did not change that much. And it only has kind of two huge dent. The first huge dent are through economy recessions. So 2008, 2000 bubble, and then 2015, 2016, those recessions actually reduced a lot in the carbon emission because people travel less, people consume less, and so inevitably, like we have less CO2 emission. The second big dent is the COVID. So COVID period, we see a reduction in the CO2 emission because, again, people travel less and people consume less. So I think ultimately, if we really want to make something workable, every one of us have a huge responsibility of cutting off and scaling back our consumptions. So I think that's a general calling that I have. At home, we use a lot of like recycled things. Like we typically don't throw away our clothes. We like my mom would make like reusable bags out of it, and try to find hobbies that doesn't consume too much. I think it'll be good to have like carbon intensity of different hobbies and different things, and try to gear towards things that you can really work on without too much carbon emission. And I mean, the climate change has been coming, right? We have seen so much climate difference or climate change, whether it's like the wildfire in California, the huge winter in California where it never snowed a lot, and then to all the way to recent smog and New York City, like people cannot breathe because the PM 2.5 has been like shooting to the roof. So things are changing, things are coming, and we all have our next generations. We want to leave the earth in the same, if not better, situation to them. So I would strongly urge people to reduce the consumption, and obviously innovation is very important. That's where we are like thriving to. But I think reducing consumption and really watch out for the carbon footprint is something that everyone can do to make impact.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not easy to reduce consumption if everything is accessible so fast and delivered in a second at your door. But definitely, I think there's this paradigm of like reducing consumption, consuming probably in a smarter way, and putting together like different circularity process in place to help that. But thank you so much for sharing your thought here on your personal opinion. So how can the community of expert investors and founders around the world can help you?
Yes, please. So I'm pretty active in my LinkedIn. So definitely like check out the LinkedIn. Our fund also have our LinkedIn page launched. So definitely kind of connect both myself and then the Climate Pledge Fund. We also have a lot of different kind of activities with Amazon. So for example, we have calling for innovations from like different accelerators organized by AWS and Amazon. I would highly recommend companies check out those programs if you're early stage. If you're a later stage, definitely reach out to us if you're in the same or the sectors that I have mentioned, and if you believe that your innovations can change the world. I'm here with my team, looking forward to hear from you.
Any question I should have asked you that I did not for this first part of the show?
So I think advice to entrepreneurs would be like, you're solving such an important problem, but sometimes you're going to get a lot of no's when you go for whether fundraising or securing your customer, just be very persistent and be have the perseverance and tenacity, knowing that you only need one yes. So even if you're facing 100 no's, 1,000 no's, if you think this technology is something that you have strong conviction, you have passion around it, and obviously great technology with a great moat, you should definitely push forward and be persistent.
Thank you so much, Phoebe, for your time, incredible insight on the in the industry. I'm so excited to see so many brilliant people like you and women like putting so much time and effort to move the ball towards a better and cleaner world. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure, and hopefully we'll see each other more. Yeah.
Thanks again for joining us on the Tech4Climate Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned next week for more climate tech insights. In the meantime, head on over to our webpage at startupbasecamp.org, where we have lots more insights and resources for anyone wanting to get involved in climate tech. If you find our resources useful, please consider donating to support our small self-funded team. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. And see you next time.